Hi, I'm Brian Dunn, and welcome to the most important podcast ever. What makes it so important? It's not about me, it's about you. This podcast is about ordinary people doing extraordinary things, the moments of resilience, the lessons learned, and the small acts that made a big difference. From retail floors to boardrooms, we'll share the untold stories that shape lives and careers. This week, our guest is Dr. Guy Beaudin, back for what is a second in a series of leadership discussions we're having. I'm so thrilled to have Guy here. And our discussion today is really all about paradoxes. Should I focus on results or relationships? Speak up or listen more? Push forward or pause to reflect? The hardest part of leadership is often this: both can and need to be true. So I want to thank Guy for being back, and it's always great to spend time with my friend. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to my friend Guy, and maybe you'll frame what we're going to talk about tonight.
Sure. First, I'm really thrilled to be invited again. I know we're going to become the Smart List podcast of leadership. That's really the goal. This I think is a really interesting topic to me, and how I'd like to frame it is some of the ideas that we're going to talk about today are from this great book, What Got You Here Won't Get You There by Marshall Goldsmith. But I think it's one of the two good books on leadership ever written. I mean, there's good books on business, but there's a lot of not very good books out there. Anyway, this one and Good to Great, I think, are really excellent books. And for me, why this book is so important is it really highlights how the rules of the game of success change really early on in your career, and most people miss the turn. So if we think about, look at the research on who are really high potential individuals, it's somewhere about 10 to 12%. And my goal today, hopefully with you in this conversation, is if you can master these paradigms of people are really, really high potential. And I think that the thing to think about is that, what you're rewarded for early on in your career, technical expertise, your individual achievement, drive to win. As you move on, it's really more about interpersonal skills, collaboration. So it's just really challenging to manage that turn, and that's what I'd like to talk about with you today.
I think that's such a great topic. And I have to tell you, even in that brief moment you just had with us, we went from 12% high potentials to 10. So people pay attention because the clock is running. And I think it is so powerfully true because we have to strive for all those sort of higher plane moments that you're talking about while we deliver in real time. And it's a real interesting tension, isn't it?
Yeah. It is. And I think the first one for me that kind of tends to crop up for people is, results matter, but it's really behaviors that will derail you. And I think you've seen, you've led many people in your career, Brian, and I would guarantee, well, I'd be curious to know before I launch into my thought, the people you promoted had results, but also really somehow delivered them in a way that got you to notice them. And I pretty much guarantee that the people that you let go was mostly always behaviors, right? And because if people are not meeting results, but they actually have the right behaviors, you can work with them. But if they get results, but they can't have the right behavior, then it's really impossible to kind of manage people and to coach them to be more successful.
One of the things you really helped me with in my journey was my frame was always unwilling or unable. And wouldn't it be great if it was that simple? Either someone's unwilling or unable, and there's many, many shades within that, isn't there?
Yeah, no, totally. I think that's a really good way to think about it. And I think this results behavior paradox, and I think, as I said, at the beginning of your career, you're rewarded for results, and somehow that becomes ingrained in you. And I think the turn for me is, really thinking about, maybe the way to think about it is this. I'm going to try to give really kind of simple frameworks that people can take away from this to really think about, how do I know if I'm really building this paradox or managing this paradox well? And for me, this first paradox between results and behaviors, to ask yourself at the end of the day, how I behave today, did it increase the chances that people are looking forward to see me come into the office tomorrow? And that answer can't be, average. It can't be neutral. You have to really conduct yourself in a way that makes it more likely for people to look forward to working with you tomorrow. I'll give you an example of someone that I worked with. These were two individuals. A great way to talk about this, actually. This was in a investment banking firm, which is very highly sales oriented. And the scorecard is pretty clear, right? The results scorecard is pretty clear. You're racking up points. You're going to make more money. And that becomes quite addictive because your comp is going up at the same time. So I was brought in to work with this team of individuals early on in their sales career to figure out who should be the next sales leader of this team. And this is one individual, who was really successful, but he also knew to look for opportunities to bring other people into the deals that he was chasing. So if someone had a contact or a particular part of expertise, instead of trying to keep that whole pie for himself, he would bring that person along really to try and increase their chances of winning the deal. And so it was pretty clear that, when you're looking for a sales leader, that really, he stood out, right? And he clearly was already behaving as a leader before he got the role. And that might be another way to think about it. Behave as a leader before you get the role. And that's one way of managing this paradox.
And you know what? It's hard to manage that paradox because you've been reinforced every step of the way for your individual performance, for your stardom. And I'll tell you a story from my past about that.
Sure.
Mark Overgaard ran District 1, and this is when we were a small company, and I ran District 2, and we bumped heads, and job one was to kick District 1's butt, and the inverse for Mark. And then Mark and I quickly reconciled, you know what? If we share what we're good at, Mark was the best numbers man I ever knew and a good people guy, and I was a good people guy in learning my way to the discipline of the math. And we shared what we learned, and pretty soon both boats rose, and our careers got moving in an interesting way that I don't think would have happened if we hadn't bumped into that.
I think it's a fantastic example. And also where this is increasingly, where it's even more difficult, is that I think some organizations actually reward, the results only mindset. So not only is it difficult because, as you said, it becomes its own sort of self-reinforcing mechanism, but you might be in a culture that reinforces this as well. And I would venture to say that there's nothing to be lost by really looking for those opportunities to collaborate, to bring other people along, to really think about, this notion of what I did today. Are people looking forward to working with me tomorrow, or are they looking to avoid me? That's probably the first lesson I'd like to sort of think about today.
I love that frame, because even when you're having a bad day and you're the leader, you've got to make it so people want to work with you, that people don't turn the other way when you're walking down the corridor. And it's not always easy to do because it's a very disciplined mindset, I think.
And I think we talked about this last time, but essentially leadership is not something you declare yourself to be. It's something that other people point out that you already are. And as we go through these different paradoxes, essentially that's the right way to think about it. How do I create the mindset, the perception, the reality in the people that I work with, that I actually am a leader, even before I get the leadership role?
That's interesting. And of course, it begs a larger question, nurtured or nature, right?
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, I'm an optimist, right? So I believe that although nature will give you a certain set of characteristics. I think if you think about your leadership, if you're mindful about, how you come across, if you're mindful about how other people react when you're in the room, I think it is possible to train yourself to really kind of manage these paradoxes, more effectively.
I agree with you 100% on that. I've seen so many people become leaders, and there's a very common refrain they all tend to share. This has surpassed all thoughts and hopes I had for myself. And it typically is people that are purposeful about their development, purposeful about how they're interacting with others. And I love your language about others recognize that you're a leader. It rarely works. In fact, I believe it's a little thing I like to call middle manager syndrome. When someone's promoted to a level of responsibility and all they want to do is clamp down and make every call. And I think it's completely counterproductive to the team,
Yeah.
but really for their development as well.
Yeah. And that's
Especially for development.
I think that is kind of another paradox for me, is kind of the need to be right. And I think that to me, is maybe the one that I see the most often, honestly. And I really think about this. There's three levels, I think, of this sort of need to be right. Right. There's the more benign one that we talked about last time, which is robbing people of the aha, which was a little bit what you and I talked about when we worked together,
For
right?
sure.
So we need to be right. They need to kind of bring the answer first and foremost. To me, that's the first level, and perhaps the most benign of the three. The second one is, someone who changes their mind but doesn't indicate that someone else's contribution created to them changing their mind. That drives people crazy. My boss changes, their mind all the time, but they don't say, "Listen, I was thinking this yesterday. Now I think A. Now I think B." And this is because of what somebody said to me or some other piece of data that came to me. And the third one is really the defensiveness, right? When others disagree with you or point out gaps in your logic, where you continue to fight them and kind of be defensive about it. And I have this one individual that I'm working with now, who's extremely bright, very, very strategic, is on the C-suite team. And we just did one of these surveys where people give feedback on each other. And people commented that of the people on the team, his contribution is one of the strongest, but it is completely being ignored because of the high degree of defensiveness that he brings to every interaction. This need to be right, as opposed to the need to move forward and the need to come to the right answer. And for me, if there's I'm going to try to give a catchphrase, for every paradox. For me, this one is, when I'm engaging in this conversation, whose needs are being served here? Am I trying to advance the discussion? Am I trying to move forward? Am I trying to make the business move forward? Or am I trying to point out how smart I am and how not so smart other people are? I would love to do a research. And if we could do this, once this podcast goes global, we'll have enough money to do this. Maybe you have an experience of this, but what is the percentage of conversations in a work environment that essentially are about how smart I am and how stupid other people are?
Yeah. And it's so seductive as a leader to fight for your point of view or fight for your idea, when really the better idea is across the table from one of your subordinates. And it shouldn't be threatening. It's actually extraordinarily validating of the leader that he or she have built a team where they're not limited to one person's point of view. But why is it that it's so hard and can be so hard in the moment?
Yeah, I think it's usually one of two things. Honestly, it's usually a lack of ego, like a sense of inferiority, or kind of a lack of confidence or overconfidence, right? And so, and I think in one way or another, we're trying to feed our ego in these situations. And listen, we all want to be the hero of our own story, but I think if you can shift what hero means in that moment, then you've got a chance to tackle this, right? If hero in the moment is not me being right, but if hero in the moment is allowing the best ideas to surface and to serve the business, then that's, I think, is how to resolve that paradox, is changing what hero means in that moment.
I think that's, and I hate to say this to you, but I think that's quite brilliant, because it really is about shifting from I'm right to we're right. It's about us. It's moving to us, the collective, the team, and that empowers everybody. And the more people that think they can influence the ship, move the ship, have the right idea at the right time, it makes the team exponentially more powerful, in my view.
Absolutely. And I actually would say that, your need to be right, not you personally, but one's need to be right, robs you of your ability to have impact and influence. Yeah. And that is, to me, that's the currency of any kind of leadership, is having impact and influence.
And it's one of the big ugly paradoxes, one of the big scary paradoxes hiding in the leadership closet, isn't it?
Completely. So if you can master that one, I think that's, I think we're up to, maybe we back up to 12% here, Brian. If you can.
Well, we're looking to get to 14. So as you think about that, do you think people are able to grow to that, change to that?
And I've seen it, right? I mean, I've worked with a lot of people who are able to make that shift. Some people will come to it themselves, where they realize that their career is stalling. Their projects are not moving forward. They're not getting invited to the big meetings. I mean, those are the signals that your career is not moving forward. Yeah. So, and then some people will reflect, or will ask for feedback, from their colleagues or from their boss. And if they're lucky, I mean, they will get the right information. But I think it's first is a realization that, you're not having the kind of career or the kind of impact or progress that you want. And you really need to go out and get that information. That's particularly early on in your career. That is the most important thing you can do for yourself.
As you know from working with me, I've built high-performing teams. I've built mediocre teams. And when I look at this, as I was prepping for this discussion, one of the common themes for me, and the frame I had was, why was that team high-performing? Why was this team not? And I really think it's about trust. I think trust is a huge component of this, because when you're the leader, your name's on everything, and you have to have enough trust and confidence in your team and yourself to let it become about us. And for me, as I reflect, it's really been about how much was I willing to trust the team, and therefore how much of my perceived control I was willing to give up.
That's interesting. I wonder, and I don't know if you can sort of answer this question, but I'm curious to see how much of those teams where you had that trust, how much was it about the actual individuals you put on the team, and how much of it was about, the culture that you created on the team? It might be hard to answer, but I'm curious to see what your reaction to that would be.
I think as the leader of those teams, it's 100% on me relative to the culture. Mm-hmm. And I think the culture, that can be such a soft word.
Yeah.
I don't think there's anything soft about it at all. Mm-hmm. I think the more you're able to build and nurture a culture that's based on shared values, shared objectives, and an absolute interest in everybody touching the trophy and getting what they want, because it doesn't have to be exclusionary. It doesn't have to be finite. It's like, it's infinite.
Yeah.
Once you empower a team to go find answers, your power, you described it earlier, I think, as influence and effectiveness increases dramatically.
Yeah, no, I like that frame, because it does, and maybe one way even to think about it is, as you were creating that culture on the team, it can be about pointing out people who are not living these paradoxes, right? People who are too results oriented, people who always need to be right. And if you can indicate to the team that that behavior will not be tolerated, then you're starting to create that kind of trust, the trusting culture.
And yet people listening to this are going to think, yes, and if I don't deliver results, how do I do this in an environment where my boss is extraordinarily rigid about results as opposed to the process to the results? We all want results.
Yeah. I mean, none of this is about, as I always say, I'm not creating, Boy Scouts and Girl Guides, right? And we do need to, you're getting paid to achieve a certain amount of results. If you're in a culture that doesn't have your kind of values, right, where it's cutthroat, and where it is, the people who speak loudest or proclaim to be right all the time are the ones getting promoted, then I would say you probably need to look for another place really to work in that will, honor you and respect you and appreciate you for all that you bring to the table.
I think that's right. And I think that nothing's permanent. There are different problems and challenges, and you can learn your way through them. I think everybody in the team is aware we need to achieve what we need to achieve. And what it really requires is the confidence to say yes, and this is the pathway to sustainable outcomes.
Completely. Do we have time for one more paradox?
Of course.
Because there's one about, kind of shining, sort of the paradox between needing to stand out and shining the light on others, which would be a little bit what you're commenting on here. And I think this one is interesting because it really plays out early on in people's careers, right? In the first arena, I would say, where this battle occurs is the team meeting, right? The Monday morning meeting, the boss brings you together. You're, kind of commenting on what you did last week, what you want to do this week. And really, this is your chance to really kind of shine and show the boss, how great you are. And I see this all the time, right? People are really, kind of hog the spotlight in these settings. And I would urge you to think about those settings almost as a live Reddit situation, right? Can you look for opportunities to upvote the contributions of others versus only focusing on your contribution? And again, this is the paradox, because that is leadership, right? Because you're demonstrating that not only can you be smart and have the right answers, you're also smart enough to know when other people have the right answer, and you're confident enough to point out, that was a great contribution, or I didn't think of it that way, and looking for ways to really kind of shine the spotlight and acknowledge the contribution of other people. I really think about sort of this as sort of dual recognition. It's okay to have recognition for yourself, but whenever you do that, you should always look for the opportunity or the end to create, sort of put the spotlight on somebody else in every meeting that you're in.
I think that's so important. I don't think there's ever been a high-performing team that hasn't had a good leader at the helm. And that's just the bottom line. You are your team. I also think, and I'd love for you to react to this, the leader, it's tough because the leader not only has to hold his people up that have had these great ideas, but when something goes wrong, invariably it does, the leader has to stand up and say, this is on me.
Yeah.
And that's what the leader gets paid for, I think.
Yeah, I mean, that's really, that is like, the nth level of this piece, right? Which is when you are responsible for other people. And I see very few leaders do this, honestly, is if there's success, you shine on the team. And if it's failure, you really you really take ownership for it. It doesn't mean that, you shouldn't create a learning opportunity, for the team to kind of think about where did we go wrong and what can we learn from this. But you're demonstrating that it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to be wrong, provided that you take the opportunity to learn from it, as opposed to pointing the finger or being defensive, or a little bit of what we talked about, so that need to be right a couple of minutes ago.
Right. And I think it's everybody in the team's responsibility to learn from victory and defeat, because let's be real, we don't get to repeat defeats.
And I think for me, if I give you the pithy, sort of
Good
phrase for this one, is like, when you walk out of the meeting, like, don't be the story. If people walk out of a meeting and say, oh, Guy hogged the spotlight today, or Guy, just talked about his results, or Guy had to be right all the time, and they're not talking about your ideas or your contribution or what you wanted to bring forward, then again, you've given up the possibility of being a leader in that moment. So don't be the story. Like, have your ideas be the story, and don't let your ego get in the way so much that you want people to talk about you. You want to talk about your ideas. Rewards will come, recognition will come, but don't be the story when you walk out of a meeting.
I really like that. And I think that's a really great place. Is there anything you want to put a bow on paradoxes with?
I would say, as always, maybe we're going to do this in every podcast, but to me, it's really about being a student of your own leadership and your own behavior, and really make you getting the feedback from the people around you, reflect on the day. Like I said, I give you sort of three kind of pithy phrases here. Don't be the story. I'm sure they'll come back to me any minute now. Whose needs are being served here? And are people more anxious to see me tomorrow than they saw me today? If you spend part of every day thinking about, did I live up to these three pieces? And next day you're going to show up, you're going to be a better leader.
I think that's really the perfect summary of what we're talking about here. I'm going to post a recap of it, because I think these ideas from you, Guy, are so important. And I think the number of paradoxes leaders are managing through is increasing exponentially. And with the advent of some of the things we're facing, facing and powered by AI, and all these things, all those dynamics are still going to be at play here, and even more complicated. But maybe it's a simple starting point to every day think about these three things. I love it. Guy, I can't thank you enough. Our time always flies by. And to our listeners, please drop us some messages. I got a number of them after Guy's last appearance with us, and that's what really helped outline this discussion. And as I said, we're going to have Guy on a reoccurring basis, on a regular basis, so that we can talk about leadership journeys, and we can talk about what we see as we move ahead. Guy, I thank you so much for your time today.
Always a pleasure, Brian.
It's a pleasure.
I'll see you next time.
We'll see you next time for sure. So that's it for this episode of the most important podcast ever. Big thanks to my friend, Dr. Guy Beaudin, for sharing his story and his ideas, his thinking. And I just want to reiterate, it is shaped by many, many different environments that he has been very, very effective in helping teams and individual leaders grow. You can listen on any place where you get your podcast. You'll find us now, and you can watch us on our YouTube channel. I'll post links to all those things, as I always do. I'm also going to post links to the two books Guy mentioned, because I, much as I hate to admit it, agree with him that many leadership books have gaps, and those two are particularly strong. And I thank you all. I want to thank the crew at Streetside Studio 7 inside the beautiful Deja Blue House of Coffee. And we'll see you next time.